Mr. Stephen Mulray, Chairman ACI FMA, Mr. Andrew Ng, President FMAS, Holon, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And I'm delighted to join you here at the 61st ACI World Congress. The last time, as you know, Singapore hosted this Congress was back in 2013. And what a difference 10 years can make. In 2013, financial markets were on a roll, and the key concern was inflation being too low. The S&P 500 was in the middle of the longest bull run in history. US inflation was running at 1.5%, and the US 10-year bond yield was 2.35%. The S&P 500 now, not exactly in a bear market, but still 8.2% lower than its record high in January last year. US inflation is at 3.7%, and the latest US 10-year bond yield is at 4.41%. In 2013, if you looked at Asia, China took the spotlight and ASEAN was in the shadows. China accounted for 51% of all foreign direct inflows into the Asia-Pacific in 2013, while ASEAN's share was 32%. In 2022, last year, China's share was down to 28%, while ASEAN's share increased slightly to 33%, more than China's share. In 2013, artificial intelligence, or AI, was not a top focus for investments. AI accounted for a minuscule 3% of all venture capital investments in 2012. But by the first half of this year, 2023, it had jumped to 23% of all VC investments. In 2013, generative AI was virtually unheard of, and investments into Gen AI was not even tracked as a standalone category. Today, there are many reports of investments, not just into Gen AI, but into Gen AI startups. In 2013, climate change was not top of mind. The search term climate change on Google was near its nadir at a quarter of its peak popularity, and this popularity peaked in April this year. In 2013, no country had pledged net zero emissions targets. Of course, as we know, 2 years later, in 2015, the Paris Agreement was adopted by 197 countries, and Bhutan became the first country in the world to commit to achieve net zero. And today, 140 countries have made a similar commitment. So how the winds have changed. If anything, the last 10 years have shown how foolhardy it is to predict the future. Nonetheless, since you have invited me, at the risk of being proven completely foolish in 10 years' time, I'm going to take a crack at laying out what I believe might be 3 dominant investment themes for the Asia-Pacific in the next decade. 1, ASEAN. 2, alternative energy. And 3, artificial intelligence. I wanted to be a bit more specific, so it would have been easier to say Asia, but the China growth story is well known. It has been the story of the last 10 years. India is increasingly well known, but I want to make a pitch for ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, 10 countries in Southeast Asia, as a major investment theme. Second, I wanted to focus on alternative energy rather than all renewables, which are important, but I think the decisive changes will take place in the energy space. And third, instead of talking generally about technology, I thought the decisive one for the next 10 years might well be artificial intelligence. I will start with ASEAN, among the most dynamic economic regions in the world. Real GDP growth has averaged 5.3% annually since 2015, outside if you exclude the pandemic years, compared to 4.3% in emerging and developing economies. And growth in ASEAN will continue to outpace the rest of the world. According to the IMF, real GDP is projected to grow by 4.6% in 2023, compared to 4.1% for emerging and developing economies. ASEAN's growth will be driven by several factors, some of them very familiar with: favorable demographics, rising affluence, rapid urbanization, and new factors like supply chain reconfigurations, increasingly digitally savvy consumer base, growing entrepreneurship, and deepening economic and financial integration. ASEAN is likely to benefit from an outward shift of manufacturing from China. Regional economies in Southeast Asia are emerging as key intermediaries for US-China trade. Both superpowers are reconfiguring trade and manufacturing through the ASEAN region. Vietnam and Thailand stand to benefit the most from this trade diversion. During 2017 to 2022, while China's share in global electronics fell by 4.1 percentage points, Vietnam's and Thailand's market share increased by 14 percentage points and 5.7 percentage points, respectively. Next, ASEAN's digital economy is growing rapidly. According to industry estimates, some 100 million additional internet users have come online in ASEAN in the last 3 years. And ASEAN's digital economy has nearly doubled during this period. It is estimated that ASEAN's digital economy could grow up to $330 million gross market value by 2025. Digital financial services in particular are set to grow rapidly. Payments, remittances, loans, and investments are projected to grow annually by between 13% and 38% from 2022 to 2030. ASEAN is also becoming a hotspot for startups and unicorns. The number of startups in ASEAN that have raised more than $1 million in funding almost tripled between 2015 and 2021. This was faster than in India, Europe, and the United States. The number of unicorns in ASEAN has jumped from just 2 in 2014 to 46 in 2021, making the region the 4th globally behind the US, China, and India. ASEAN is also becoming financially more integrated. Efforts have been made to ease cross-border offers of securities within ASEAN to support fundraising activities. The ASEAN Collective Investment Scheme framework allows fund managers to comply with a common set of standards and offer funds to retail investors in other ASEAN signatory countries under a streamlined authorization process. This provides a more direct and efficient channel for cross-border fund distribution across ASEAN countries. Singapore is a signatory to this framework. But ASEAN faces one key risk. It is one of the most heavily exposed regions to the consequences of climate change. According to a study by the Nanyang Technological University and University of Glasgow, ASEAN is at risk of losing over 35% of its GDP by 2050 as a result of climate change, if no remedial measures are taken. And so this leads me to the second investment theme I want to highlight: alternative energy. The world is not likely to reach net zero emissions by 2050 without a credible energy transition in ASEAN or Southeast Asia. ASEAN is the 4th largest energy consumer in the world currently. Economic development and population growth will likely cause a 2.5-fold increase in energy demand in ASEAN by 2050. The region relies on fossil fuels for 80% of its energy. If left unabated, it is expected that ASEAN's emissions will more than double by 2050 as fossil fuel generation keeps growing. So there's an urgent need for transition finance to support ASEAN's energy transition. It will not be easy, but ASEAN has some strong factors in its favor, which will make alternative energy a promising investment opportunity. ASEAN has a diverse range of renewable energy potential: hydropower, geothermal, and bioenergy. But it will not be a simple matter of just shutting down coal plants and installing renewable energy. Given the growth in energy demand and the young age of existing coal plants, the viable strategy, economically and commercially, is to manage the early retirement of coal plants and replace them with renewables progressively. ASEAN is developing electricity interconnections that will allow for the efficient sharing of renewable energy across borders. Work is progressing on an ASEAN power grid, which encompasses both building physical infrastructure and creating markets for the efficient utilization of renewable energy. A concrete example, in the 4 months since the launch of the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project in June 2022, more than 170,000 megawatts of hours of electricity was imported to Singapore from Laos PDR. Green financing instruments are taking off in ASEAN. The Singapore Exchange, SGX, launched last year the first set of 5 MSCI Climate Action Futures contracts. This was followed up just last week with iShares' launch of the MSCI Asia ex-Japan Climate Action ETF on SGX, which helps investors reduce their portfolio carbon footprint. The ETF, with an AUM of $426 million US, is the largest equity ETF launched in Singapore. And of course, 6 years ago, MAS launched the Sustainable Bond Grant Scheme. It was recently enhanced, and basically it offsets up to 125,000 Singapore dollars of expenses incurred for external reviews of eligible green, social, sustainability-linked, and transition bonds. On top of that, ASEAN is developing a regional taxonomy for sustainable finance. The ASEAN taxonomy provides a common reference point on green and transition activities in the ASEAN region. This avoids fragmentation of taxonomies that would discourage international investors. Version 2 of the ASEAN taxonomy was issued in March this year, introducing screening criteria to classify activities in the energy sector, including, for what I mentioned earlier, the managed phase-out of coal. The ASEAN taxonomy is the first regional taxonomy to introduce criteria to classify the early retirement of coal-fired power plants as a transition activity consistent with global science-based decarbonization pathways. ASEAN has introduced a set of common bond standards to facilitate the growth of sustainable financing. This includes the ASEAN Green Bond Standards, the ASEAN Social Bond Standards, ASEAN Sustainability Bond Standards, and the ASEAN Sustainability Linked Bond Standards. Issuers who comply with the relevant standards can label their bonds accordingly, and having such common standards can help investors make informed investment decisions. The third investment theme I want to touch on is artificial intelligence. While the use of AI is still nascent, it can be potentially transformative over the medium to long term. According to estimates by Kearney, AI has the potential to contribute $1 trillion to the ASEAN economy by 2030. ASEAN governments and startups have begun using AI in a variety of interesting ways. In Thailand, the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration has started using AI to manage Bangkok's infamously traffic-logged streets by estimating traffic volume, analyzing bottlenecks, and implementing solutions. Indonesian agri-tech company Pitik uses AI to detect potential issues in chicken coops and provides recommendations for increasing efficiency in chicken rearing. Its technology currently helps farmers in Indonesia supply up to 5 million chickens across the archipelago each month. Thai agri-tech company Easy Rice uses AI to inspect and verify the quality and variety of harvested rice and reduce the cost of human error and digitalize this checking process. In financial services, AI can help accelerate transition financing for a low-carbon future. Last year, MAS launched Project Nova, an AI utility aimed at helping financial institutions generate insights on financial risks. Its first use case is to help financial institutions assess the sustainability performance of Singapore's real estate sector. Financial institutions can now use Nova for their ESG risk assessment for originating, underwriting, and servicing sustainability-linked loans. ASEAN could become a fertile ground for generative AI to thrive. It has a digitally savvy consumer base, favorable demographics, and active investor interest in Gen AI developments in Asia. And Gen AI could have broad-based impact on ASEAN's productivity and affect many sectors such as e-commerce, education, operations, and virtual assistants. At MAS, we have launched Project Mindforge, which looks into the risks and opportunities for Gen AI in the financial sector. This project brings together data resources and domain expertise from the banking sector, together with top AI companies, state-of-the-art technologies, and advanced algorithms. And we will take an action-oriented approach of use cases, prototypes, and pilots to aid in the learning and translation process. We need safe and responsible AI, and MAS is working at this. So back in 2018, 5 years ago, MAS developed the Fairness, Ethics, Accountability, Transparency, or FEAT, F-E-A-T, principles with the financial industry, basically to provide guidance on the responsible use of AI by financial institutions. And this work has continued through the Veritas Consortium to translate and operationalize these principles of fairness, ethics, accountability, and transparency. And with the benefit of road testing now, the consortium has released Veritas Toolkit 2.0 to support financial institutions in integrating these FEAT, F-E-A-T principles into their internal risk governance. It demonstrates Singapore's willingness to facilitate the responsible development of innovations that offer transformative economic potential. So those are the three investment themes that I touched on: ASEAN, alternative energy, and artificial intelligence. And the opportunities abound and flourish in Asia. And before I conclude, I must add that Singapore's connectivity and ecosystem makes it the perfect place for financial institutions to capture these winds of opportunity in ASEAN, in alternative energy, and in artificial intelligence. Singapore has political and economic stability, well-regulated financial markets, excellent digital connectivity, a skilled talent pool, and extensive trade and investment linkages with ASEAN. We cannot predict the future, but as the French philosopher Henri Bergson puts it, the future is not what will happen to us, but what we will do. I hope this conference will give you ideas on what to do and how to do it. Thank you very much.